After many months of Disney's The Mandalorian being out, I finally watched it. Not gonna lie, I've kind of been hesitant to watch anything Star Wars related as I have strong, and I mean very strong and very negative feelings towards the recent sequel trilogy and, you know, the the atrocious handling of writing. Plus there's the little issue between me and Disney. We got some personal beef, and then of course there's the president of Lucasfilms. Yeah, not a big fan of her, Kathleen Kennedy. Not a big fan of the way she talks in general. I could go on and on and on about all the things wrong with the movies and the companies behind them, but that's not what this is about. You know, really weird and unexpected turn of events, they actually produce something that isn't bad, overly formulated, or, you know, something with questionable writing choices. I'll start out by making this statement. The Mandalorian is a good show. It has solid writing, memorable characters, and a likable protagonist, all things that the recent Star Wars movies lack. But not only that, they somehow managed to reimagine and reinvent CG technology and developed a new method that will probably change filmmaking forever. And this is all thanks to Jon Favreau, our Lord and Savior, the creative mind behind the series. Now, there's a lot of things I want to get through in this video, including my own thoughts and opinions about the writing behind the season, something that I'm actually kind of qualified to judge. So if you're here for my review and opinions, I'll leave a timestamp where that begins. But I also want to talk about the work that went on behind the scenes, including the fact that this show could actually revolutionize filmmaking and the planning of CG scenes by testing out some cutting-edge technology called stagecraft. The Mandalorian is basically a video game in more ways than one. Not only does season 1 play out like a mission basically in a video game with, you know, armor upgrades, weapons unlocked weapons unlocked past certain levels and side quests, but the actual visual foundation behind the show is based on video game tech. So ILM, or Industrial Light and Magic, is the visual effects company behind the show. In fact, ILM is part of Lucasfilm, founded by George Lucas himself. Not a lot of people know that George Lucas actually created this visual effects company behind a lot of popular movies like E.T., Indiana Jones, and Jurassic Park. It's kind of amazing. So about 5 years ago, ILM started developing a new technology called stagecraft. Stagecraft had been used previously on films like Solo and Rogue One, but not quite as extensively as on The Mandalorian. This show was kind of like the tech's test run. Stagecraft is essentially a buff version of green screen. Instead of a green screen, it's a giant LED background. So the LED screen is a 270-degree semicircular space that's 20 feet tall and 75 feet in diameter. It's a big boy. ILM partnered with Epic Games to create an Unreal Engine, which allowed for real-time manipulation of the VFX background on the LED screen. And not only that, but the background is affected by camera movements, so it shifts and moves with the direction of the camera. With stagecraft, since the VFX crew and filmmakers can manipulate the background in real time, they can add changes where they see fit. This cuts down post-production time quite a bit, and if they still need to make changes, it's easier to do reshoots as it's filmed in a studio rather than on location. The thing that I liked most about the way that they filmed the show is that they shot it with a mixture of stagecraft tech and practical sets. I'm not really the biggest fan of CG. I mean, I like it to a certain extent, but I prefer practical when see fit. So I really enjoyed this mashup of the two. And Baby Yoda, for example, he's a puppet. He's a puppet mixed with CG, so that's also nice to know. With all that being said about how they filmed the show, I think now's the time to sit back and appreciate the masterpiece of cinematography we got. I made the comment in one of my earlier reaction videos about how beautiful the show is, and I stand by my statement with even more appreciation now that I know how it's filmed and I did that research on it. It's a visually stunning show. And it honestly probably would have been successful if that's all it was. Not saying that Disney likes to throw money at a project just to make it look pretty on the surface with no substance underneath. Star Wars movies. But this show is good for more than just its pretty looks and groundbreaking tech. It's actually got a story to it, which is a shocker, I know, for a Star Wars property. I should really stop making Disney bad jokes. I'm actually kind of terrified of Disney. Please don't hurt me. Let's get into my actual review of the season and my opinions on the writing. As I started out by saying, The Mandalorian is kind of like a video game. You have the main plot line where it starts out with Mando going on a bounty hunting mission for a prized asset. Upon arriving on location and finding that the asset is a green wrinkly baby that's kind of cute, Mando decides to take the baby under his wing. The main plot focuses on him protecting this baby from the client and his ex-Imperial troops, and as we later find out, from an officer named Moff Gideon, who we still know little about. Throughout the season, however, particularly in the middle of the show, we have side quest episodes. Episode 5, for example, puts the main plot on the back burner and focuses on a bounty hunting mission that Mando goes on to get some money for repairs on his ship. This is what the writing world calls roadblocks, or setbacks for the protagonist to overcome. It's necessary for A, character development, and B, story development. The problem that a lot of people had with these episodes, the middle ones in particular, was that they seemed to ignore point B. Not much happened in these episodes that actually attributed to the main plot, which yeah, I would say that episode 5 and 6 merely served as a way for the audience to understand Mando's character and the decisions he makes, plus it focuses on strengthening that bond between him and Baby Yoda. But is this really such a bad thing? I would prefer to spend time developing the protagonist and his bond with other characters, because not only is the plot important to developing the overall story, but the characters as well. They're the reasons why we stick around with the story. I mean, they're the ones that make us care. Yes, the episodes feel different from the rest of the story, and I said it in one of my reactions, you can tell that they have this different feeling or different vibe to them. One of the reasons, because each episode is actually directed by different people, and regarding episodes 5 and 6, they're actually written by different people too. Sometimes this can be a disaster, as one of the main issues with shows is tonal shift. One episode might feel like an epic Shakespearean play, and the next it's just this cheesy soap opera. It kind of throws off that continuation in viewing and feels almost like you're watching two completely different shows. And this happens in The Mandalorian. The tone between the middle episodes are clearly different. We go from an old western gunslinger vibe in one episode to a sketchy prison break in the next. But I think it works. Why? Because it's fun. These two episodes were enjoyable, and we got to see a different side of Mando. And again, normally I wouldn't like this in the fact that I could tell it was directed by different people and even written by different people before we even got to the end credits. But they were funky and they were entertaining, and I kind of appreciate that. But you know, I can definitely see where and why people had problems with it. The last few episodes go back to the main plot of the story, where we get the final showdown between Mando and Gideon, protagonist versus antagonist. Let's just say I didn't expect Disney to go this hard, but they did. Mando and Gideon face off, and because Mando is the protagonist and literally the name of the show, we know he ain't about to die. A lot of shows and movies, particularly Disney, have this problem where the audience knows that the protagonist isn't going to die, so there really isn't no threat or fear there. Having a battle between hero and villain can sometimes feel meh without that level of tension. However, this show does a great job of handling that problem and creating the appropriate amount of tension. I was genuinely questioning if they were going to pull a Game of Thrones on us and kill off Mando. The fact that they didn't doesn't really matter. It's that element of fear in the audience during a showdown between antagonist and protagonist that does, and they pulled it off. Another common problem with Disney and Star Wars is that they write events and problems for characters, but they get out of them scot-free. There are no real stakes in the story. Why aren't people paying for the mistakes they made? Why don't their actions have consequences? Why aren't there realistic outcomes to the events that take place? The Mandalorian somehow avoids this issue. Mando isn't written to be the perfect character, which I'll get into more a little bit later. He isn't written into scenarios where he has the perfect plan that'll get everyone out safe all the time. There are real consequences. For example, Quill dies, not only because he's slow as hell, but because Mando's plan went south. Gideon already knew that the baby wasn't there, and because Mando tried to phone him, it gave away Quill's position. When trying to escape the Imperial troops, they run into a sticky situation where Mando's group becomes ambushed. IG-11 decides to sacrifice himself to save the rest of the group with his self-destruct features, a sacrifice well deserved. We love a show or movie that depicts realism and consequences to characters' choices. It's what makes the show impactful and meaningful. It's what makes it different from its Star Wars movie counterparts, and frankly better. I would say that the overall plot is pretty good. It does play out more like a video game plot rather than a TV show plot, which for some could be a problem. Personally, I think it's interesting and different, but I definitely recognize that this writing can be a little iffy at times because of this, but I would never label it as bad writing. It's just a very simple main plot that's fun to watch. Yes, on a broader scale of things, there's not much in terms of plot and writing that makes it very special. If it didn't have that Star Wars label, it probably wouldn't be as popular, just saying. It would still be good, but because it's often compared to the sequels, it definitely elevates its status. It's a basic first season plot, like most first seasons, you know, with a basic premise that is just setting up the world to come. I imagine that things will expand in the future, but for right now, this is the first season. And for a Star Wars property, they're doing a fantastic job. One of the things that drew me into the show is the fact that it was described as a space western, which was a huge bonus for me. And of course, with westerns, the main protagonist is going to be a silent, broody gunslinger type, which is exactly how I would describe Mando at first glance. In the first episode, he barely talks, he gets straight to the business and blasts the heck out of anyone who disrespects him, which is the ideal prototype of a bounty hunter. But once the season goes on, we learn more about his character. Not only do we get snippets of his backstory, but we learn about who he is as a person through his decisions and his bond with the other characters. If you watch my reactions, you know that I occasionally, just occasionally, have issues with Mando, particularly regarding his horrible, and I mean horrible, parenting choices. While I do get annoyed at him at times, this is actually kind of a good thing. It means that our protagonist has flaws. He doesn't automatically become a good father to Baby Yoda and makes the perfect choices regarding the child. His plans don't always work out, and when they don't, he suffers the consequences. While he is a great bounty hunter, well known in his profession, he isn't completely invincible. He sometimes loses fights, and he sometimes gets the crap beat out of him. He's smart when it comes to his profession, but really dumb when it comes to the child, which is something that is completely new to him. He can be calculated and tactical, but also very rash and impractical when acting on emotion. This is how you write a protagonist. He is a real person who makes real mistakes. Star Wars movies, take note. You root for Mando not only because he has badass armor or a slick personality, that's a bonus, because underneath all that armor, he's only human and he makes human mistakes. His relationship with Baby Yoda is very well written. Over the course of the season, we watch as Mando develops a relationship with the little one. He grows to care for the child in the first 2 episodes, and when he returns Baby Yoda to the client, he has to go back for him. Even in these first few episodes, you recognize the bond between the two, and it makes sense. Mando was orphaned at a young age. We've seen that in his backstory through flashes. This most likely is the reason why he has empathy for that wrinkly green baby he considers helpless. If Baby Yoda looked like a 50-year-old man, Mando probably wouldn't have the same response, but because of this helplessness and innocence, it's what drew him in. It's what drew us all in. Then in the second episode, the two spend time together before Mando returns him to the client. Mando actively saves Baby Yoda from the other bounty hunters, and the baby recognizes him to be his friend. Well, I mean, Baby Yoda pretty much claimed Mando as his father from the very first second they met, but we really see this when Baby Yoda in return saves Mando's life from the Mudhorn. The secondary characters for the most part are fun to watch. Cara and Quill both form a friendship with Mando and become the two people he most trusts. Grief Karga and Mando have an interesting relationship as well, one that kind of starts out as like a manager managing their star. It then turns into enemies when Mando betrays him and the client, and then because Karga sees how cute Baby Yoda is, becomes friends with him again. It's like this on and off again relationship. Interesting, love it, keep it up. And then of course there's the IG-11 unit, which I think Mando shares the most complicated relationship with, and probably one of my most favorite. Mando first meets IG-11 on a mission to capture Baby Yoda. Despite his history and distaste for droids, he still teams up with IG to take down the mercenaries. Mando kills him because you know, after all, the IG unit is a killing machine, and he can't have IG harming hair on that green wrinkly head of Baby Yoda's. Episodes later, Quill finds IG's body and puts him back together, while also altering his programming so that, you know, he's not a deadly killing machine anymore, and he programs him to be a nurse droid. When the group meets up in the 7th episode, Mando sees the resurrected IG-11. He becomes very vocal about his disdain for the IG unit. He doesn't trust him around the baby. I mean, IG almost killed Baby Yoda, so like, why would he? But towards the end, as Mando spends more time with IG-11 and realizes that he has changed, he grows more fond of him, and the fact that IG saved his life probably helped that too. And Mando Mando, for the first time in ever in this show, actually gets sad, or at least as close to sad as we're ever going to see him. IG even says, like, I hear it in your voice, stop pretending, I know you're sad. I would have definitely appreciated more time with the IG and more scenes with him. I think his sacrifice was still very effective because of this relationship that he had with Mando. Plus he was like a badass character and I liked him since the beginning, so it worked for me. I feel like we could have spent a little more time with all of the secondary characters actually to develop and know them more, but they may appear in future episodes or seasons where further development may occur. For the number of episodes in this season, however, I think they did a pretty good job with the secondary characters and developing their arcs. Our main antagonist is another one we don't see too much of, but he didn't even appear until the end, so for his character, I'm not too upset that he didn't get quite as developed as the rest. We still don't know his motivations or his reasons for why he wants to obtain the baby, or even his personal backstory. Yeah, we do know some pretty baseline stuff. He's ruthless, that's for sure. I mean, the very first scene that we meet him in, he literally blasts his own men because of their incompetence. He took part in the Great Purge, as Mando explained, that drove the Mandalorians into hiding, so another check on that ruthless part. I do have high hopes for this villain because A, he looks badass in that black armor holding something called a darksaber. I was like, whoa, what is that sword thingy? And it's called a darksaber. Good to know. And also B, the actor's really great. So I hope in the future we can get more from his backstory and learn more about his arc and all that stuff, because I love myself a well-developed villain. So this is a good show that has, for the most part, good writing. Everything non-writing wise is also very good. Cinematography, action sequences, acting, directing, special effects, practical effects, costume design, all of it. It's not hard for Disney to make something appear pretty on the outside but lack absolutely any substance, like I said. And yes, mainly I'm talking about the recent Star Wars movies, but they were able to break free from that with this show. It kind of makes me scared that now Disney realizes the amount of potential that this show has, like the amount of money they'll make off of Baby Yoda, that they'll begin pulling harder on the creative strings. I mean, I really do hope that Disney and Kathleen Kennedy keep letting Jon Favreau do what he do best and not force him into making something safe or formulated. As of this moment, they are done shooting for season 2 and it's most likely coming out in October 2020, though things could change seeing as how the whole world is under quarantine right now. I couldn't find really anything out about the number of seasons they're planning on doing, like if they have a set number in mind and have the story laid out. All I've seen was that season 2 is done, it's wrapped and ready to roll for post-production. If you're a Star Wars fan, this show is for you. If you're not a fan of the recent sequels, that's okay. This show is nothing like the movies. It's actually good. And that'll be it for this video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment expressing how much you agree with my opinion. If you have other thoughts, whatever. Yeah, leave those in the comments too. I don't care. Subscribe, please. I'm in desperate need of those. And I think I got it all covered. So goodbye. And have a nice life.